Harry, I wanted to thank you for coming today to this interview. We've been having a lot of fun doing them, and I know you have some wonderful stories that you'd like to have videotaped so that your children can enjoy them, and grandchildren for that matter.
Well, yeah, I'm looking forward to this, and let's get started.
Okay. All right. The questions I have are so broad, but I know that they'll lead into stories that you want to keep. The first one is what was your childhood like?
Well, my childhood was, I think, different than lots of kids that growing up. My mom was 43 years old when she had me, and the reason that she was that age was that I had a brother that died of spinal meningitis. And so my mom decided that, she needed a larger family, and that's how I came about. And I was basically an only child because my sister, my sibling, was 13 years older than I was. And so I was kind of raised as an only child in an adult situation.
Well, what were your parents like? Your father had a fascinating career, I know.
Yeah, my father was actually a lawyer, and he had a doctorate of law degree, but he worked in Washington, D.C. a lot, and he was also very, very political. And so I was raised in an adult situation at a very young age. And my father spent most of his time in Washington while I was at home with my mother when she was there.
And where was home?
Home was in Los Angeles, California. And I went to a school called Carl Curtis, and I went there first through sixth grade. I remember all my teachers, can name all my teachers that I had, and I especially remember my sixth grade teacher, Mrs. Andrelli, and she was a great influence on my life.
Well, your mother was a great traveler too, wasn't she?
She was, and that was sort of good and bad, I guess, growing up. We talked about this a little bit. When my father was in Washington, my mom decided to go to Africa, and she was gone for 3 or 4 months. And I was sent to my aunt and uncle's house to live, and I lived up in San Francisco for three or 4 months out of my life, and went to school there. And I can't remember if it was first, second, or third grade, but it was somewhere in that time frame. And the one story I was relating to you for my life up there was that after school, was in an after-school program, and we went to Golden Gate Park, and I got lost. Fortunately, I was found.
Yeah, fortunately, you were found is right.
But I do remember my childhood, and I do remember being with adults all the time. And some of the sayings that I remember were children should be seen and not heard. And I guess I kind of lived up to that. But I learned adult conversations when I was very young in life. One of the big tragedies in my life was I was in fifth grade, and my father, died of a heart attack. So I lost him very early in life. And again, having a 13-year-old sister, older than I was sort of out there on my own. And I think I started my life on my own at a fairly young age.
Well, you also spent time in Newport Beach. Your parents had a home there, didn't they, as well?
Yeah, I did, and that was really where my life was. I was one of the very early surfers back in the early 50s, and I loved surfing, and I had some great memories of surfing. And two of my best memories were I was both a body surfer and a board surfer, and I loved body surfing. And the waves, the bigger the better, and there was no such thing back then as lifeguard towers. We were on our own. And I remember one time going out, and the waves were just huge, and they were so big that you could hear them cracking back before they would break. And I was surfing with 2 other friends, and we took off on this one big wave, and one of us went right, the other one went left, and the third one of us in the middle just went straight. And when we finished that wave, everybody on the beach was standing and clapping. And I thought that was really neat. And the other place I loved to surf was the Wedge, and that was really very, very exciting. And there was one wave there, and it's kind of funny how I can remember back to all these years, just 2 or 3 instances of surfing, but the waves would come in and they would hit the jetty and bounce back and go up to a huge peak, and I was body surfing down the face of this wave, and I did this beautiful flip, and I was going so fast I couldn't believe it. I let out a huge scream as I was surfing, and that's the only time I've ever done that. And I think I was scared to death
I
going
think
down
you
there.
might have been.
And then I did a flip and landed right on my feet, right on the sand, and I decided I wasn't going back to the wedge that day.
No, I think it was a little more than you wanted, wasn't it?
Yeah, and the third story that we're talking about surfing was I have very few memories of my father because he was mainly gone, and like I said, he died when I was 10. But I have two memories of him, and one, we were playing baseball in the back of our backyard in our house in Los Angeles. We're playing catch, and I do remember that. And I think it was the only time I ever played catch with my father. But it was neat. And the other memory I have, he had a heart attack, and he was down in a bed in the living room in our house in Newport. And I was probably, again, must have been 8 or 9 years old. And I went over to the ocean front, which was 3 blocks away, and went body surfing. And when he found out I did that, and I didn't tell anybody I was going, I just used to go. And when he found out, he really yelled at me, and I had to stay on the couch for like, I don't know, 24 hours. I wasn't allowed off the couch. And those are my memories of my father with interaction with myself.
Yeah. Well, you also learned to sail at this time in your life, didn't you? And
I did.
The interesting thing, you're still sailing today, and I love that story.
Yeah. I had a snowbird, and that was like a 14-foot catboat, and sailed all summer long all over the bay, and just loved sailing, loved the feel of the boat. You could feel the wind, you could feel the wind working on the boat, you could feel when the sails were right, and it was just a real feeling of freedom for me, and I still have that feeling today. Love sailing.
Well, you came to the University of Arizona, but you made a pit stop on the way based on some swimming and water polo talent. What can you tell about that?
Yeah, that's another thing I want my kids to remember. I had a swimming coach, Coach Nuland, and he was also a very big influence on my life. I remember he went to Occidental College, and he was very upset because he got a B in economics. And so he was so upset that he took the whole economics course over to get an A in. And he treated us very fairly, but he demanded excellence from us. And that's where I think I learned discipline, and I learned how to do things right. And we would swim before school, then we had our swimming after school, swam for 2 years. There at Newport Harbor High, and I played water polo 1 year. And got a swimming scholarship to Eastern New Mexico University when I left Newport. I thought I was really going to like Eastern New Mexico because they sent me a really neat brochure. They said the temperature was an average of like 78 degrees, but they never told us that it got to be minus 30 and then 120, and that's how it got out to be 78 degrees. So I only stayed there for 1 semester, couldn't stand it, came back to the University of Arizona where the next part of my life began.
That's
but
right.
We're getting ahead of ourselves here.
Oh, okay.
I'm not going to go into the part about my middle schools, but I went to... After I graduated out of 6th grade, my mom decided I needed to be with men and boys because basically she was alone in the house with me, and sent me off to Harvard, which was a military school, and I was boarding there. And this is where I think in my life I decided my life wasn't that good. And I wasn't a real problem, but I was kind of a angry boy, I guess. And I got fairly good grades, but every month I would get a D or an F in deportment, and I didn't like that military stuff. And I can remember I was doing things all the time just to cause problems. And we lived in this building, and below the building was the cafeteria, and where they also had reveille, and they had a loudspeaker system with records that played, and they would play different bugle sounds to wake up and go to bed and things like that. And I thought that was kind of dumb. And so in the middle of the night, occasionally I'd go down and I would put the record on, and I'd have the bugles blaring all over the schools. The other thing we used to do with breakfast, I would sit there and we would put butter in our napkins. And then we would loosen the napkin. It would it would sag down, and then we would pull it real fast. It was like a slingshot, and the butter would go up and stick on the ceiling. And then whoever came in at lunch or dinner would hopefully drop on their heads.
I would hope so.
Yeah. But I only spent a couple of years there, and I think it was mutual. Harvard and I decided to leave. And then I went to Webb, which was another private boarding school. Didn't do very well there, and don't think I was asked to come back there either. And finally went to John Muir, which was a junior high school in downtown Los Angeles, and I kind of didn't fit in very well there because the junior high there was 7th, 8th, and 9th grade, and I came in the 9th grade, and so everybody else was well established. And didn't like that. Went to LA High next, and I loved that school. That was so much fun. I was on the swim team, finally got something that I really enjoyed, and we had such a diverse group of people. As an Anglo there, I was a minority. It was probably 30% Oriental and 30% Black, and then 20% maybe Hispanic, and then 10 or 15% Anglo. And boy, I loved that school and had a great time there. I went to All City on swimming, and that was the only time my mom ever came to a swim meet to watch me swim, and that was fun. I swam at USC for that. After that, I then went to Newport Harbor High School, and that was my last 2 years in high school, and I really enjoyed that.
You know, you mentioned earlier about Coach Nuland. There's a little story I'd love to hear you tell about when the kids, we were married, long married, and had kids, and
Yeah.
you saw him on the beach.
Yeah, that made me feel really, really good.
Now, he went on to coach the Olympic
Yeah,
team,
he did.
too.
He coached water polo in the Olympics, and he was a great guy. And he was a lifeguard at Newport Beach, and he was the guy. He was one of the head guys. He was the administrator. He'd go up and down in the lifeguard in the Jeep, looking at everybody and making sure they're doing what they're supposed to. And you and I were walking down the beach. This is probably 20 years after I graduated from high school, and he stopped the Jeep in front of us, and he looked at me, and he said, "You were the backstroker."
Yeah. Pretty amazing,
Yeah,
huh?
couldn't remember my name, but knew what I did.
Yeah.
And again, we're kind of getting off here because I ramble, but one of my great experiences in life, which I'd like my kids to kind of remember and know that I did, was that when I graduated from high school, I was in the Merchant Marine for one summer, and I was a junior assistant purser on the President Cleveland. And that was a great summer. Man, I loved it. I got a white uniform, and we had shoulder boards, and I had a little heft stripe on my shoulder board. And my job was to lifeguard at the pool during the day on the ship, and then at night I had to dance with all the young ladies.
Poor thing.
And it was really fun. We went to Kobe in Japan, Yokohama in Japan. We went to Manila and Hong Kong, and I had lots of really good experiences for an 18-year-old doing that. I met a gal named Bloody Mary in Hong Kong, and she met us on the pier, on the dock. And she was just like the Bloody Mary in South Pacific. In fact, that's probably how she got her name. And she took care of the sailor boys, which she called us, in case we missed our ship and got lost. She would hide us out. She would get us papers to get us back on a ship. Plus, she provided all sorts of different services for sailors that I won't go into at this point. And the other interesting thing that happened to me was in Manila. Another guy who was a junior assistant purser and we decided to go see Chinatown in Manila. And we were in this old Filipino cab that they were legendary at the time. I don't know if they still have them or not. And the fella asked us if we wanted to see Chinatown, and we said yes, we did, and drove through Chinatown very, very slow. And then all of a sudden, both back doors opened up, and two more guys jumped in with us. And they had the Filipino switchblade knives, and they go like this, and they open up. He said, "Give us your wallets," and we did, and we ran all the way back to the ship, and made it back fine.
So that's your memory of Manila, huh?
Yeah, and that was it. And then in Hong Kong, my memory there was we thought we were really, there were 6 of us that were junior assistant purchasers. And in Hong Kong, we thought we were really the cat's meow, great guys, and we were up in Kowloon having a great time, sitting at some restaurant, drinking and smoking cigars, and we're 18 years old. We must have looked absolutely ridiculous. But all of a sudden, we look at our watches, and we're going to maybe miss the ship, and that's not a good thing to do. And so we found a taxi cab driver, and we all piled in, and we kept handing him money over the seat, telling him to go faster and faster. And finally, he was driving on the sidewalk, and we just barely did get back in time, back to the ship. But those are my memories of those days, and those were great days. I loved it. It was really fun.
It sounds like it was a lot of fun. But after you left Eastern New Mexico, you came to the University of Arizona.
In January.
And when you were there about 5 years, you met me.
Well, I met you long before I was there 5 years.
Well, maybe you were there 3.5
I was on the long program there because we were in the Navy Reserve. I was in the Navy Reserve at that time, and everybody was going to Vietnam, and we were trying to postpone it. So we were on the 4-year program that took 5.5 years. But meeting you was the greatest thing in my life, and I can remember that to this day. And I was in a fraternity, and I needed a date. I didn't really want to go look for a date, and so we knew lots of girls in the organization which you were in called Fraternities, and I had a pledge call you and asked you out for a date because I'd seen you previously.
He was pretending to be you.
He was pretending to be me, yeah. And I was busy doing something else. I can't remember what it was, but it probably wasn't very important. And then I can remember going to your house and picking you up and seeing you and thinking, oh my goodness, this is really, really neat. And I think it was love almost at first sight. And then I got worried about what the pledge might have said because I didn't want to do something wrong, and so I had to confess to you right away that I didn't call you. It was somebody else pretending to be me. And the only other problem on our date was that I had promised to take the house mother to, it was, what kind of a?
Founders
Day banquet, yeah. And so we tripled. It was you, me, and the house mother that went to the Founders Day banquet.
Well, and you had that beautiful GTO then.
I did. That was the only new car that I ever really bought in my life. And I thought it was a great thing. And so I bought a 1966 or 1967 GTO with the money I had earned working summers in the oil fields. And